All right, thank you. So we have, this is a final segment. Now, we probably won't be able to get through all of this section on identification and inventorying. But what we don't finish today, I will carry over to tomorrow because of its importance. Now, I don't want to rush through this too quickly. As a matter of fact, this is the subject of the second workshop. Mm-hmm. All of the second workshop will look at this concept of identification and inventory. And it is one of the key obligations of the convention. So the state party has an obligation to prepare an inventory or inventories in the context of their own situation. So you will know what, if you need a single inventory or multiple inventories, depending on your situation on the ground. And we look at what are some of those, what constitutes an inventory and inventories here in a second. No? So there, it's called identification and inventory. So we're looking at what the convention says about identification and inventory, why inventories are needed, planning inventorying projects, and examples of inventorying processes. So Article 11B says that each state shall identify and define the ICH present in its territory with the participation of communities, groups, and relevant non-governmental organizations. You notice that is in bold. It's very, it's an ethical one, and two, it's necessary and a requirement under the convention that any identification and defining of ICH must be done with the participation of the communities, groups, and relevant NGOs. And this helps to address the question that Adriana asked in the last section. How do I interpret? Well, you try to do very little as little interpretation as you can, but rather have the communities interpret for you, no? When identifying and defining ICH. With a view to safeguarding. So Article 12.1 says, to ensure identification with a view to safeguarding, each state shall draw up in a manner geared to its own situation, one or more inventories of the ICH present in its territory. Now, why it says one or more inventories is because some countries are so big that countries might need, it might not even be a matter of the size of the territory, but some countries have millions and millions of persons, and therefore communities and individual practitioners of elements in that same manner that represent that population, and therefore they might have different governance structures. So, like in Brazil, for example, they have inventorying at the province level, at the municipal level, and then you have inventorying at the federal level. Right, so you have different layers of inventorying that might occur. Let me give you a case in point with respect to Grenada. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm looking at Grenada, and I see, of what I've heard, there are three main population groupings. There is Grenada itself, the island, there is Carriacou, and then there is Petit Martinique. The question you'd want to ask yourself is, given the cultural dynamics of ICH in the country of Grenada, known as Grenada, do we need to have three separate inventories, one for each island? Or do we just have one inventory with ICH representative of all three islands, right? So that's a question to ask. And the reason and the solution will come based on your understanding of how things work on the ground. Do you have a separate coordinating body in Carriacou and in Petit Martinique, a separate entity in Grenada? Will they be able to work independently, all with the same skills and objectives to create inventories at the island level? Or do you want them to work with the same skills and training toward creating a national inventory, where when you define the inventory anyway, as part of the identification and defining, you would say that This is an element originating in Carriacou. This is an element originating in Tivoli, right? This is an element originating in Petit Martinique, or an element originating in St. George, right? That sort of thing. Those are components of the identification. So I don't know as yet, but it's a question I'm putting now, so that you will have to think about whether or not you want a national inventory, or you want 3 different inventories, right? Or one inventory with representation from all 3, depending on what structure can work for you from the state perspective. Why are they needed? So that you can identify and define, so that you can establish viability. And what we mean by that is, after you look at it and you examine it and the threats and risks and so on, you're saying, okay, this requires our attention, right? The communities want to work to safeguard it. This thing requires some attention. How do we get the attention and the resources that might be needed to support the element that might be endangered? Inventories allows us to build relationships for safeguarding. One of the central principles under which I personally operate when it comes to safeguarding, this whole thing is a relationship business, right? With culture, in order for culture to survive, it needs relationships, one person to the other, one community to the other. Imagine, I'll put it in plain, imagine carnival without the people, right? Is that carnival? Imagine the boat builder without the sailor, huh? Or the captain, right? Imagine oil down, is it again? I want to say without breadfruit. Well, you get the point, but without persons who can cook it, no, and who can transmit that knowledge, right? It's needed for the purpose of raising awareness, to reinforce the identity and the continuity of the ICH bearers community building. A big part of, and this is a good point, because a big part of reinforcing and ensuring the viability of an element is bigging up the bearers. Oftentimes these people work in silence and they do their thing. It's part of their livelihoods, their work, the kite builder. But every so often it's nice to big them up, you know, because they carry the weight of what we call culture, no? They carry the weight of that, right? Inventories are needed so as to contribute to good governance and sustainable development. So once you have an inventory and you understand the cultural landscape, then you can begin to put in the legal framework. You can begin to put in the policies and make interventions in order to make the thing viable. You can begin, the tourism people then can also plan how to make the thing sustainable. The boat building, are the trees still available? No, let's go plant some trees, right? Gender and identification and inventory. It is important to take into account the gender dynamics of ICH elements in the process of identification and inventory. Gender dynamics. Now, my favorite example, when we were doing documentation and inventorying work in an indigenous community, we made the mistake of just showing up at the house, you know, and then the wife peeped through the door and she says, well, I can't talk to you, my husband isn't here. You hear that? I can't talk to you, my husband isn't here. Right? So in terms of gender dynamics, you want to be aware of the general dynamics within certain communities to begin with. Right? If a woman had gone to the door, she was more likely to speak with the woman. But because I am a man, she could not speak with me until her husband was present. Right? So it's the same thing with ICH elements. That also shows up in how elements are manifested. So you see in some ceremonies, the men are the dancers and the women are the cooks, right? The men are the ones who play the marimba or the instruments, and the women are the ones who do the prayers inside the church, right? So you want to be aware of gender dynamics involving ICH and be sensitive to it, no? Because you might be looking at things and based on your own biases, you're saying, well, I didn't grow up doing that. What are they doing, you know? That sort of thing. That's neither here nor there. How you grow up, if you're involved in this kind of work, is neither here nor there, right? The goal is to be sensitive to what you're observing, no, and try to understand it as best as you can, and it will help you to minimize possible conflict, no. So it's important for dialogue and gender awareness within the communities, you know, especially when we go into other communities, we won't understand all the nuances of it, right? But as I've seen some people attempt to do, this isn't how we do it where I'm from, right? What are you doing? Why do you have to do that? That's a no-no, right? Just from an ethical perspective, that's not your place, especially if you're going into a community to inventory. But the best way to deal with that, again, two ways. One, have the communities participate in the documentation and inventorying itself. And two, if you are going to be involved directly, just listen, no? And try to learn. One of the things about culture, as you're well aware, that it often features marginalized groups and gender bias in identification, right? Sometimes you have these groups, look at name. You know, you hear it under your breath, you hear it in street talk and so on. In one of the things the convention tries to overcome is the further marginalization of groups that are already marginalized, no? So again, this is something to keep in mind. And of course, gender bias. A good one is when you see boys participating in traditionally women's roles and girls participating in traditionally male roles. Have you seen that in your communities? I'm sure you've seen it or heard of it, no? And then we tend to, because of socialization, call the boy A, B, and C, or call the girl X, Y, and Z, right? So this is something to be aware of in this kind of work. No, you don't want to further marginalize groups for whatever reason, no? Right? It is to be a fully representative process in terms of the involvement, in terms of gender in inventory, right? Simply put, the convention, for example, whenever you are making inscriptions at the international level, they'll ask you about gender. How did you account for gender? When you did your consultations, was there gender balance and fair gender representation? Right? Some macho organizations will only listen to what the men have to say. No? Some feminist organizations might want to listen to only what the women have to say. Right? So what I'm saying is you want fair gender representation in any aspect of the ICH work you're doing, no? Right? Again, this is not to dictate, because you'll find that within elements themselves, you'll find that men have particular roles, women have particular roles. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having fair representation in the overall implementation, no? Imagine Daryl saying to Adriana, you'll stay in the office. Me and Ezra, we going out to do the documentation work. You belong in the office. You could imagine that? Daryl in a problems, right? Right? You want to avoid that sort of thing altogether. You want fair representation, not only in the physical presence, but in terms of the ability to share and and ventilate and so on. I don't think we have that problem generally in the Caribbean. I could be wrong, but I think our women are probably more fierce than the men, no? Mm-hmm. Women know how to put the men in their place anyway, right? So I don't think that's an issue here in the Caribbean, no? But just to be aware of, no? What are the leeway and restrictions? So one leeway is the state can create its inventory based on your particular situation. We raise the question of whether or not you want a single inventory or three separate inventories or one inventory representation from three entities, that sort of thing, right? What are the restrictions? You are restricted to identifying and defining the ICH present in your state's territory, right? If something appears in your inventory that's from Belize, it's probably a problem, no? Except that if there's a large Belizean population in Grenada practicing a particular element, that's something to be aware of that should also appear in your inventory. And this was a big discussion in some countries where you have immigrant populations. You also should inventory whatever cultural practices manifest there too, no? That is something to really be aware of, because the convention is an inclusive one. So long as the populations are within your territory, you'd want to inventory it, so whatever those cultural elements are, so that you understand the landscape, the cultural landscape, no? Of course, some countries are more prone to take the current crisis in Europe or in the Middle East or in South America, in the Colombia, the Venezuelans, and so on, right? So these countries would have to grapple with those issues in terms of documenting immigrant ICH, no? And similarly, if your people are leaving and living in other spaces, other states who ratify the convention will also have similar obligations, no? You want to inventories to be established with communities, groups, and NGOs. That's a given. It's like a song now. It's like in the back of your head. Nothing happens without the communities. Established with a view to safeguarding. You want to respect customary practices governing access. When you're doing inventory, it's not every aspect of a thing that you will see. Sometimes when you end up with your inventory, you'll define the element based on what the community shares with you, but you will also note that the community, the house which is used for a particular sacred ceremony, we did not have access to, but it constitutes a part of the practice of the element, right? The inventory must be regularly updated. So we're not talking, well, how you update can depend. If you're going to update what Carnival looks like, do you want to update that every 5 years, every year, you want to update it so that it's aligned with periodic reporting? Do you want to update it because it's ever changing every 3 years? Or do you want to update it when the communities bring new information to you? So there are all sorts of variables to think about in how you update your inventories. And you must report on it, no? You must report on your inventory, right? Because picture this, you don't want your children going to school, your grandchildren going to school, and they're learning about a particular Shakespeare's masque, right? For argument's sake. And the information they're reading is 20 years old, and they don't have current information. You don't want that. You want them to have access to the information that's 20 years old, 15 years old, 10 years old, 5 years old, and current. That's the idea, right? You want them to have the full spectrum of how the element evolved. Just giving you an example, no? Yep. The scope and size of inventories. The convention does not refer to the preparation of one national inventory. The operational directives refer to inventories within a state, thus indicating that there may be a number of inventories within a single state. We talked about that. The scope and size may vary considerably depending on the aim, the available resources, the methods of information generation and systematization, right? So if you know that there's good technological links between Carriacou and Petit, Martinique, and Grenada, and you want to house the central database in a central inventory in Grenada, and whatever work is happening in the two islands can be sent via digitally, virtually, no? If you know that that system can work for you, then you go that road and it's the best system. But if it's a system where it requires back and forth travel and you know that resources aren't available and so on, then you might want to have an island inventory, right? One in Carriacou and one in Petit Martinique, or one for Carriacou and Petit Martinique together, and another for Grenada, but still constituting inventories for the state of Grenada, no? Right? So these are things to be looking at. Or is the culture so strongly a shared culture among the islands that it just requires one inventory, right? So many things to think about from your perspective being on the ground. How do you organize the information? It is against the spirit of the convention to create hierarchies between ICH elements. So Carnival isn't more important than Shakespeare's Mask, or Shakespeare's Mask isn't more important than Oil Down, or boat building, or whatever, no? What you're creating is looking at the landscape, picture the landscape, and you can see all its components out there in terms of the ICH elements. Not one being more important than the other, but simply giving all the opportunity to continue to be viable and to exist. That if you picture it in those terms, that's what you're doing, no? Giving all the opportunity to continue to survive. To organize the information, some states parties use the non-exhaustive set of domains in Articles 2.2, we identified them yesterday, with the adaptations and or additions. So again, you can add your own classifications or domains if you wish, but you can stick with the existing domains. So far, what I've seen in the Caribbean, that most of the elements can fall within one of the domains. But if you choose to add just language by itself for argument's sake, no, because you want to emphasize language retrieval and language revitalization, and you want to put language as part of a separate domain, then by all means, you're free to do so. With the caveat that language itself cannot be inscribed at the international level. And here's another one that can't be inscribed at the international level: religion. Any religious denomination, let's say you want to inscribe, is there a local religion there in Grenada? Anybody wants to point out? Name anyone.
Shango.
All right. If you want to inscribe Shangoism as a religion, you won't be able to do it, right? What you would be able to inscribe, however, are practices related to Shangoism that are ICH, no? Maybe Shangoism has a particular ritual relating to nature and the environment, no? Right? And a particular practice, and if that could be, but not Shangoism itself as a religion. Not, because then you'll end up with Catholicism as an ICH. You'll end up with the Baptist religion as an ICH. You'll end up with all the religions of the world as ICH. And that is not the goal, but rather you want associated rituals, expressions, manifestations, if that's something you want to do, to end up there. So neither language nor religions themselves, no? Just as a note to you. Whatever classification system is used, it is important that it facilitates appropriate access to the information by the communities concerned and by other stakeholders in the process. So notice this, this came up yesterday. Whatever system you use, it should facilitate appropriate access by the communities concerned. So what system are you going to put in place if you go down to out in Carriacou and you interview all of these persons And as was said yesterday, they never get the information. They don't know what happens to it. That's something you have to address up front, no? You have to ensure that they know how to access the same information that they gave you. They should have access to. It's only right. It's an ethical principle you'll have to integrate into your work, right? However that is, right? If you come in and say, Mr. Darrell, remember the interview that you did with us the other day when you were down in Carriacou? Yes. Can I have a copy? Yes, sure. Here. You have a flash drive here. Here it is. Right? You have to have some system, no? Where it's accessible. You are not the owner, you're just the caretaker. Caretaker, no?
Mm-hmm.
So using existing inventories, do you guys have any? I heard Angus this morning say something along about with Grenada Trust, that there is an inventory already in Grenada. Is that right? Angus and Rena, is that right?
No.
Okay. All right, because I was going to.
Well, no, you see, let me say, many years ago, don't want to embarrass the government here, Cabinet actually approved a list that of 23 sites that would be considered national heritage sites.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing.
Okay.
A year and a half ago, National Trust put out a book that Angus basically provided the text and the narrative, inventorying the sites again, because there was nothing in writing. All you had was this cabinet conclusion, a proposal that Michael Jesme had done in 2008 that was ratified in 2012. And that's it. And that's a cabinet document, 2 pages long. And then our book is 200 pages long with photographs and a description of every site and why it's significant. It's a coffee table book, but it's not it's the closest thing we have to an inventory.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So it gives you some idea then, but it's not an inventory itself. All right, that's fine. That's good. Yeah. But it's a starting point, no? A reference point.
It's a starting point.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Wells?
Yes, may I say good afternoon, Sherma Wells, Grenada Cultural Foundation. I agree with Angus Martin. There's no official inventory existing in Grenada, but we do have components in different places like Darrell just mentioned. At the Cultural Foundation, we ourselves have our very own inventory. As a matter of fact, we have a website which we are just about getting to relaunch, which has a plethora of information, cultural information that is available, and it in itself act as an inventory of cultural information as well. So we already have that established there internally. We have a very developed database. We were able to assist the National Trust with a number of persons attending this workshop here today based on our umbrella covering parish organizations, community groups, etc. And we have been working along with people like in the Saraka and other cultural undertakings in the nation. So we have quite a bit of information, a solid amount of information that is going to be available to the public via especially our website. So that can be considered as well as an area, as a repository for that kind of information to be added going along the process of this whole exercise. So the Cultural Foundation is the umbrella body. A lot of times we seem not to be recognized as that for culture in the nation, and the relationship with the National Trust will serve us well in this process of ensuring that we can capture our intangible and intangible heritage. I just want to, as I conclude, mention a reference to the Haitian soup that was recently recognized by UNESCO. It was banned. It came out of our ancestors during slavery. it was banned and now it's being recognized again. And here we have the oil down in a similar life, similar history. Of course, it must be authentic. And when we talk about being authentic, a lot of us interpret that in different ways. And I think that we need to certainly ensure that when we get out there to get the information, the sources must be reliable and it must come from a very authentic position in order for us to really capture it in its essence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. So you have various components already that I can see the synergies starting to develop. And especially for the sharing of expertise, capacity, and resources, I can see things starting to take shape. On the question, you used the term authenticity just now, authentic. The convention does not allow the use of the word authentic, no? Because simply because culture changes, practices change, authenticity will change, no? There's no, it's a thing that we tend to do. We argue that a thing is authentic, but I'm just putting you on your foot there currently so that in terms of the international level, it's not something to include. And if you can avoid it even now in your descriptions and as you do the inventory process, that would be a plus, no? But the convention itself does not use authentic because when you have shared, I'll give you an example, when you have shared heritage across borders, where you have like states that have bordering communities and so on, when the heritage is shared, they begin to accuse each other. It becomes a source of conflict, no? And the convention tries to avoid that, right? That's not authentic. This is authentic, that sort of thing. And so that's one of the reasons the convention does not use the term authentic, no? All right, so just giving you a heads up on that. So the second, third, what we'll do, we'll go through this slide and the other, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Because as I said, I don't want to rush through this section because of its importance. We have a whole workshop on this coming up shortly. But I want everyone to be able to digest and begin to think in terms of how it will work out on the ground, no? Because there are many moving parts that I can see here in terms of organizations, NGOs, groups, researchers, museums coming into play, no? So in terms of existing inventories, this can cause difficulties as states. Let me go back to the top. Existing registries or lists compiled before state parties ratify the convention may be presented to the committee. In your case, hearing what you said just now, you don't have one, but what you have are some resources that can help to inform the inventorying process going forward in terms of information. So that would be sort of like your literature review, if you want to use that term. That's where you read up on what's there, and then you go into the communities, and then you begin to do the documentation in a systematic way, so that you can get more up-to-date information as part of being current, no? This can, however, cause difficulties if that is the case, as state parties are expected to indicate how the communities concerned participated in the identification of the information presented and how they gave their consent for the information to be included, no? So again, communities are at the center of that process, and it would show up clearly in any inventory that you produce. Older inventories of ICH may require updating, not just to include new elements, but also to check and, if necessary, adjust existing information. No? We want to also see the issue of sustained consent and the need for regular updating. There is what is called free, prior, and informed consent. That is one issue where when you're engaging the communities, you want them to be informed of what you're doing prior to you doing what you'll be doing or collaborating with them on, and that they give the consent, no, to be interviewed. Again, ideally, if communities themselves are involved in this thing in a hands-on way, it bodes well, no? And then there's the issue of sustained consent, no? which is slightly different from free, prior, and informed consent. Sustained consent says that you want the information that's being documented and being placed in an inventory, that it can be, there's the permission to use it continuously, right? And to make it available and accessible continuously for whatever purpose, for safeguarding in this case. No? Criteria for inclusion. And you know what? I think we will end there today because it begins to get a little bit more technical now. And I want to reference a section of the operational directives tomorrow. But if you'd like me to finish this one, I can. It's left up to you. We're at 12:45. We're already 15 minutes over. Okay. Because I also have a homework to assign.
Oh. Well, I think it's good for us to stop now.
Yeah, we can.
You're going to start a major part of the program next, and I don't think we should start that at the end of the day. So, right. But you know, there's a problem with doing a job well. I mean, Marlene did such a job of that homework thing that she could get stuck with that. You know, it's like when you ask people to say grace before meals or a prayer before a meeting, boy, be too good. That becomes the rule. Anyhow, let's try to rotate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, Ezra, you were going to say? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, Darryl, you want to? I'm gonna pick a volunteer, because we're in the practice of picking, not have people volunteering. So I'm gonna do my 10 steps on the right side today and see what happens.
They're going to call you.
Then I'll let you know who the person is.
You should also choose online. Choose online too.
Yeah. But
One and one.
Okay.
We don't want to discriminate.
That's true. So we are learning on our feet, Nigel. We have four platforms. So we're going to pick from the Zoom platform today, and I'm going to ask Margaret to be a sharer tomorrow.
Margaret Snag.
Thank you.
So
Margaret, do you agree to share tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, she said.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. You seem to be one of the favorite students, no?
Yeah.
Just talking too much is what it is.
We also want to represent the convention. That is, we have to respect gender and so on. So maybe tomorrow we're going to have to pick a male. Okay.
All right. So here's the assignment then. So Margaret, tomorrow you'll have about 5 to 7 minutes to recap some of the main ideas that were brought up today. But here is something now for more general reflection. It's not very intense, but it will require some sleeping on it, so to speak. No. So here's the homework for tomorrow. If you are involved or have been involved with an ICH element in Grenada, this one is for you. Write a short reflection on how the various stakeholders are involved with the element. For example, how are the practitioners involved, families, NGOs, communities, craftsmen, and so on. So this particular exercise is if you have been involved with an ICH element. All right, and you don't have to write it per se, but just reflect on it, jot down some few notes. And then after Margaret gets finished tomorrow, we'll hear some of that, no? So the idea here goes back to the first unit that we did this morning, relating to how groups, individuals are involved with elements. So that circle that we were talking about. So the idea is for you to picture the elements of Grenada and just create a visual, mental image of what that looks like in terms of people participation. No? So that's if you are involved or have been involved with an element of ICH in Grenada. And here's the second one. So that's, the next one is, if you work with a state organization or institution, write a short reflection on what you believe your organization can do to help implement the convention in Grenada. That is for the purpose of keeping we culture alive. No? So I hope I spelled correctly. Right?
Yeah.
I just spelled it like how I heard it. Right?
Would you kindly repeat the wording on the second question, because I'm rapporteur for tomorrow and I have to make sure I have my details.
Are you seeing the screen, Margaret?
Oh no, I was busy typing on another. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I'm just wondering.
Okay.
Because I thought you guys weren't seeing it, no? But so the idea is to write a short reflection on what you believe your organization can do to help implement the convention. This morning, Ezra asked what's going on now, no? Well, we know.
Right.
So in the morning, we'll be suggesting what can be done in the context of the now and in the future. What can we propose to do for the purpose of keeping we culture alive and implementing the convention in Grenada? Straightforward enough. No? So you'll fall into one of two groups. If you work with a state organization or institution, or if you've been involved with an element of ICH in Grenada. Okay. So there might be some persons who might not fall into any of the two, but we'll have something for you later on. All right. So good enough? Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay, Nigel. So Nigel.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if with the spelling of culture, you could just replace the O with a U.
All right, sir.
AUL.
All right.
I'm good with
sir.
that.
Let me do that, sir. Let me do that.
Yeah.
Capital culture.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. There it is. For the purpose of keeping we culture alive. Last night I had a dream of some tagline for tourism in Grenada, but I can't remember it. It was so perfect in the dream, but I couldn't.
Could you put the first slide up again, please?
Yeah, the first slide. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not that one.
No, you had it.
That one?
No, the one after. Yeah.
Be sharing the PowerPoint.
And Nigel, if you could take out the we as in WE.
Oh God.
OUI.
That's too much patois, man. They go say oi.
We is yes.
Yeah, but you see, don't forget, we don't want French here.
We don't want French.
We want colloquialism.
Okay.
So the most you could do is put WEE. But we go. We culture. Yeah,
well, we're anchoring the convention, so I'm just using. Do we add an E or we culture?
What?
Or is it W?
No, but
okay.
See, we are trying to avoid pure French.
Okay.
If you add an E, that might just sound.
Yeah.
2 E's.
Add an E?
Because somebody reading my ticket school.
Well, I don't think you should add. I don't think you should add a extra E, because you bring about a different interpretation.
Yeah, we small culture. Yeah.
Meaning, you know what, culture,
Yeah.
not only small, but it also could take on the culture of urine.
Yeah,
so
urine
I think
culture.
you need to stick with WE.
Yeah. WE. Yeah.
Got you.
We like to say we a lot here, but we're using the French OUI. So we as in yes, culture.
We as in where are you, Margaret?
Carriacou.
Very cool. So when you say we in
Then we don't mean that one. We mean OU or I sometimes.
No,
I'm just using the play on words. I don't know.
No, I think
Maybe
I have
it's
to
a
challenge
stretch.
that. Because what we really saying, what I was saying when I introduced this yesterday was, this is our culture. So we means us, not OUI, which is yes in French.
Okay.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
You reserve the right.
Can that change?
Yeah. I don't understand this thing.
That is big, yes.
So it's our culture.
So what we'll do tomorrow, we'll ask Ezra will lead that part of it, and we'll be looking for hands. And if not, then he will become the autocratic professor and start calling the who's who of Grenada, no? All right. So any housekeeping matters to end the day? Thank you everyone for a nice session again, good discussions, covering a lot of topics and concerns certainly, and offering an opportunity for solutions as we work through the week. So Ezra, any housekeeping matters?
I think everybody is still actively engaged. Maybe we can keep them for another 15 minutes. No, we okay, Nigel. Okay.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. Let's come bright-eyed and we'll call it bushy-tail, and I don't know where that comes from, so let's not use that. So let's bushy-tail. No? So let's meet again in the morning. Thank you for being here today and hanging in there, and we'll see each other tomorrow.
Don't pull anything yet, just in case. Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Okay. So you recognize yours. Yeah, just gently, because if anything else unplugged, we wouldn't record. Yeah.